Hey guys, it's Nathan with Team Saurus here. Gonna walk you through some of what's been going on. We're gonna try doing the state of the Saurus this week as a video, hopefully to keep me from being as rambly as I am when I'm writing. So what's been going on here at Team Saurus has been pretty much all GenCon all the time. Getting stuff ready for GenCon, making sure that we're gonna have all the games that we want to sell there, getting all the marketing efforts in place, talking to our booth volunteers, making sure that we have hotels and all that sort of fun stuff set up and ready to go so that everyone coming to GenCon can have the absolute best experience that they can. So I'm going to start with some news at the top. Most of you know Wasteland Express here has been sold out at the publisher level for about 3 weeks now, and that is still true. And I've been hearing that a lot of people are having a hard time getting the game from their friendly local game store because they are also sold out. The good news is we have copies coming in October where you're going to be able to get the game in just a few more months if you don't get it. So that means make sure you're talking to your local game store. So if you want a copy of the game, try to grab it now if you can. If you can come to GenCon, we'll have some copies available there, not a lot. So make a beeline to our booth on one of the days. We'll have copies every single day of the show, but we're not going to have enough for the show. So make sure you come early if you really, really want a copy. In October, we will have more copies available, which is the good news. The bad news is even producing as many copies as we can, I don't think we're going to be able to meet demand this year. The game's been in really high demand, which is exciting, but that does mean it may be a little bit hard to find for a while, which is a good problem to have, obviously, but we want to make sure as many of y'all that want the game can get it. We do have some really cool things happening. We're going to have an in-store launch the week of GenCon, and we're going to be putting news out of about 140 or so game stores nationwide that are going to have in-store events teaching you how to play Wasteland Express delivery service. That number's not final, it's still growing, so hopefully that'll keep going up, and you'll be able to have somebody teach you how to play Wasteland Express delivery service and actually play a full game of it. And we're going to be doing that with the Envoy Herald support over the next month, starting the week of GenCon and moving on beyond then, so that you'll have an opportunity, even if you can't find a copy to buy, that you'll be able to go to your friendly local game store and play it, and then hopefully order a copy for the re-release in October. We have some super exciting news that we'll be sharing next week about something really, really cool we're going to do in stores during the relaunch. But do make sure that you can try to get a copy for now. If you can't get a copy today, do what you can to make sure that you get copies in October. Because like I said, I suspect, given what we're seeing online and from our distribution partners, it looks like this game is going to be really supply constrained, probably for the next 3 to 6 months. So we'll see, but we will have more copies in stock just as soon as we can. Other news that we've got going on Team Saurus is a lot of stuff I can't quite talk about. We have our final release of 2018 is going to be announced at GenCon, or 2017, sorry, will be announced at GenCon. Really, really excited about this one. We've not shared much about it at all, and we're going to stay as tight-lipped as we can. But pay attention during GenCon. It's going to be one of the coolest games that comes out this year. Beyond that, our games that we're going to have at GenCon, just to kind of give you a brief recap, we'll of course have Wasteland Express delivery service for sale. Really excited about this one. Obviously just got a great video done by GameWire, so thanks Brittany for doing that. We also just got an amazing review from Blue Peg Pink Peg, on top of the great coverage we've had from Geek and Sundry, Ars Technica, and Bleeding Cool, along with Man vs. Meeple. And we expect more reviews to be coming out in the coming weeks. Really, really excited about the basically universal praise for Wasteland Express. You know, after you put this much work into a game for this long, really, really exciting to see that everybody loves it as much as we did when we believed in it. We'll also have copies of Red Scare there at the show. We'll have less copies of this guy than Wasteland because we're having to air freight him in. He's a September release, but if you haven't seen him yet, let me take my glasses off real quick. Super fun game where, and I don't know if this is going to work, but you wear actual red reveal glasses. So where y'all should see a P at the top of this card, I'm seeing absolutely nothing. So I'll try and get that so you can get an idea of how awesome this game is. Really fun hidden deduction game. I don't need to wear those anymore. That will be coming out in September in stores, but we do have very, very, very low availability at GenCon. We will be demoing the game at our booth, so swing by, check it out. We'll also have games being run in the open gaming hall all weekend long, so you can check out this and Wasteland. Two other games that we're going to have there is another game that in even lower quantities than Head Scare or Wasteland Express will be there. That's King's Life from Bruno Faiduti. Really beautiful artwork from the Miko, Bruno Faiduti and Gwendolyn Boukwan, and I'm sure I'm not saying anyone's name right. I did not take French, and I'm terrible at pronouncing French things. Really amazing, fun game. I compare it to a 30-minute version of Cosmic Encounter. Really, really fun take that game. Really beautiful artwork. Funny theme, the king doesn't want to run the country anymore. He wants to just have fun, and it's your job as members of his court to convince him what he should be doing other than running the country. Like I said, it plays 4 to 10 players, 4 to 8 players, I'm sorry. It's one of those weeks. 4 to 8 players, half an hour, really, really fun, light game, beautiful artwork. This is one that will be out in September as well, one we're really, really excited about, and we're going to be talking more about this as it gets a little bit closer to release. And then the last game that we're going to have available is going to be Starfall, which has been out since about November of this year. Beautiful light bidding game from Scott Alms, amazing artwork from Ian O'Toole, just a gorgeous, gorgeous game. You kind of see as the light catches the box just how pretty the sky is. It's got some good reviews from Dice Tower, good reviews from the Game Boy Geek. Pretty much anyone who's seen this game has fallen in love with it, and it's one that we're going to be demoing as well and just trying to get a little bit more attention on, as it's a pretty new release that got a little bit lost in Christmas, but sales have been good. But come check this one out and play it if you haven't already seen it. It's a fantastic game that we really, really, really like here at Pandasaurus. So beyond that, I want to talk a little bit about a lot of what we've been doing and working on. So I mentioned we're going to have a big announcement at GenCon that I can't talk about yet because Molly will come in from the other room and throw things at me. Really excited about announcing that. We have some more news coming on Wasteland Express delivery service. I guess this is not a spoiler to say we do have a BGG contest going live to win copies of this game along with Red Scare on Friday of this week. So that's something to look for. Later this week, as we get a little bit of attention, what I'd say is pay attention to the Board Game Geek page and attention to our social media accounts on Friday and all throughout next week, because that's when we're going to have some really, really, really cool news on Wasteland Express delivery service and a lot of what we're going to be doing. Beyond that, I wanted to sort of take a moment to talk about some of what we've been doing and give you useful insight into a publisher's life and how that works. So GenCon's coming up, and this is probably a good time to talk about one of the more boring aspects of the board game industry. So you all know games get delayed. They get delayed probably more regularly than they come out on time, and what we can do about that as a publisher. And one thing that we're trying to do is be better about not announcing games until they're ready to hit the printer. So while there still could be some delays, it's less likely to happen. And where a lot of printers slip up and where a lot of publishers slip up and why release dates consistently slip. For instance, Wasteland Express is a game we've been talking about for about a year and a half, and it took longer to come out than we intended. And I think we learned a lot of lessons when we started talking about this guy. And that is, I think generally when publishers set release dates, it's not that they're intending, or in our case, that we're intending to put out bad information. It's generally that, you know, you've talked to artists and the artists have availability windows coming up in a month, and, you know, they give you an estimate that the game's art can be done in 45 days. You have a game you really believe in, that you've been playtesting, that you've been putting through game development, and you think it's about ready to go. And so you then talk to the printer and you get a release schedule about how long it's going to take to print the game. And of course everyone tries to aim for Gen Con or Essen release up through the holidays. And so you put the announcement out, maybe some box art, maybe a little bit of artwork that you do have done, and then everything kind of goes wrong. And a big part of that is simply that I think a lot of times there's a tendency to be very optimistic, especially I think small businesses tend to be optimistic. We want this to be a GenCon release, therefore it's going to be a GenCon release. And I think what winds up happening is artists' availability window, your graphic designer may be available in January, but then his last project was more complicated than they anticipated it being. And then that pushes their availability window back 45 days, and then your project is a little bit more complicated than they thought it was going to be, and then that pushes it back another month, or an illustrator that you had booked previously takes a little bit longer to get the work in than they anticipated. That holds up the graphic designer, and then the graphic designer says, well, I can't do much without the illustrations, so I'm going to move on to this other project that's more ready to go, and then that sort of backs off. That's something that we're trying to do a much better job about here is we're not going to start telling you guys about games until we're ready to hit the printer with them. We're very, very close. And that's going to allow us to do things like announce a game at Gen Con that's coming out at Essen, and that's because it's already at the printer. It's already being printed. So by the time you hear about it, we'll have a mass production copy in our hands at Gen Con, one of the early ones off the line. So then all we're doing is waiting on the rest of the copies to finish printing. So I think that's something that we're trying to do better, and another thing that we're trying to do a lot better job of is our game development side. And we're going to have some announcements about a couple of our upcoming games at some point in what we're doing with our game development side. And that's going to be to release a full-throated playtesting network. Obviously we've always playtested games, but we've relied on closer networks of people, and what we're trying to do now is get better data and more data about games and how they play, and we're going to be partnering with one of my favorite people in the industry. I'm not going to say who he is yet, to do development on 2 of our games for next year that we're really pumped about. So I want to take a minute to talk about game development. So if you've ever wanted to work as a board game publisher or a designer, I'm going to give you a couple of pieces of advice. First of all, you should own both of these. This is Unpub, the published card game. I don't know, it's a little bit hard to find right now, I think, but if you do, as a card game, it's pretty fun, but what it really does is it's an idea factory, where each card has a theme, a mechanic, and a component on it, and what you do is you hand people cards and you kind of create things. So this is a good tool for early game dev, if you ever have just a blank about what you're looking for a new direction, the game's missing a little something. Grabbing 5 of these cards and trying to find a mechanic or trying to find a component that can go in the game can help kind of unstick a brain. And a really, really useful tool that you absolutely have to have, and that I literally have on me at every convention I go to all year long, is a deck of lenses. There's a book that goes along with this called A Book of Lenses that I recommend reading. Great material. I think there's also an app. I don't have the app, but I carry this guy around with me, and he has a bunch of useful information about game design. So this is the lens of the puzzle, and you might grab a card out of the deck and it says puzzles make the player stop and think. To ensure your puzzles are doing everything you want to shape the player experience, ask yourself these questions. What are the puzzles in my game? Should I have more puzzles or less? Why? Which of the 10 puzzle principles apply to each of my puzzles? And you have to go to the book for that, but a little bit more. And then, do I have incongruous puzzles? How can I better integrate them into the game? So that may not apply to every game design ever, but it's really, really good information to think on as a game developer or a game designer, is to sit back and when you're viewing a game is to understand where the game is, where the mechanics live, where the fun of the game is, and what experience you want players to ultimately have. And this is useful not only for game design, but also game development, which is taking a game that is most of the way there and helping to put the last polish on it, or change the direction, or take out things that don't fit, like a light family game that might have complicated victory point scoring at the end, probably needs to be developed into something a little bit smoother. So game development is more a second set of eyes, either from a publisher or from a full-time game developer or a part-time game developer, coming in and kind of sanding off the rough edges that a game has or doesn't have, and making it hum just the way you want it. And this is immensely useful for me when we're working through games that we're thinking about publishing, or we're putting through development to try to make a little bit better than they already are when they're signed. Also really, really useful when it comes to components and player experience, which is where I bring you to 100 Things Every Designer Needs to Know About People is the best user experience book I have ever read. And while it's primarily designed for online media and how that works and how to get people's attention and how to convey information, it's an important part of game development and game design as well, which is how do we as a publisher make clear to you, the player, the end user, what it is that we're trying to get you to get out of this game. And I could talk for hours about this, and I won't, not yet. I'll probably dedicate one of these just to user experience design. But user experience is when a game seems a lot simpler to play than it is. It's almost always down to user experience design, which brings me to a game that I've been playing a lot of recently that is fantastic, which is Scythe. Scythe, on top of being an amazing game with beautiful components and everything that everyone obviously loves about Scythe, has amazing user experience design, and that comes from those player boards, which I'm not going to set up right now, but I thought about it, but I'm trying to keep this video short. The player boards that allow you to select your actions and upgrade your army facility is some of the best UX design that you're ever going to see in a board game. It makes things that could have otherwise been a complicated tree, technology tree where you have to unlock things and keep track of all of this stuff. It makes it as simple as removing a piece, moving a cube from the top down to the bottom, and now I've unlocked 2 abilities throughout the game. I've made something cheaper to do on the bottom of my board, and I've unlocked an additional ability at the top of my board. Such a brilliant UX work. I don't know if Jamie did that, I don't know if someone else did that, but whoever did the UX design work on this did an amazing job. I think we've done similar stuff in Wasteland Express that I'm happy with, but if you ever want to have a real appreciation of user experience design, sit down and play a game of Scythe. And for just a second, think about that player board. And not how clever it is and not how it's neat to do, but think about the other ways that you could have been asked by a game to keep up with that same information. It could have been decks of cards. It could have been crypt sheets. It could have been all of these things that would have taken, what's a mid-heavy-ish weight game and made it a chore to play. And the team at Stonemaier did an amazing job here. So I don't want to just gush about Scythe the entire time, though I could. But from a user experience or user design standpoint, Scythe's one of the best games you're ever going to see. So the next time you're playing Scythe, think about that board and just think about the design decisions that went into making that board as clever as it is, and how much work must have gone in to that experience, and how much better that makes the game than it otherwise could have been. So I think that's something that often gets overlooked is getting the UX or the user experience exactly the way you want it. So that's kind of my thing about that. I want to very briefly mention another game that I have been playing the heck out of, and that is Flip Ships. I think I'm holding this upside down. I am. Beautiful artwork, really fun dexterity game. I recommend checking it out. Quanche Morea obviously is somebody that we've worked with and will be working with again. Check our GenCon announcement. But really, really fun dexterity game. If you're looking for a light filler game, something to start the evening with, something between games, something at the end of the game, or something to play with kids, I think this is not only a beautiful game, but a really fun little dexterity game. So that's it for the state of the Saurus. I'll hopefully be back next week to talk a little bit more about GenCon, talk about all of the cool Wasteland Express stuff that we haven't announced by then and will be public knowledge. And maybe Molly and I will talk a little bit about